Good morning, everybody. Could be good afternoon for some. We're just going to give a couple minutes here as people kind of filter in to the webinar, and we'll get started here in a couple minutes. Looking forward to the conversation,
We need like a ticking clock on here, like Jeopardy style. The count is
guys. Jeopardy style, yeah, absolutely. Marta, Sam, how's your morning going? While we're waiting for a little bit here.
um, I'm in Minneapolis,
Gotcha.
and
Not
the
sure if that's a
weather's
good
very,
thing or not,
That's
but
it.
the weather's very confusing. I love it here, but like yesterday, it was the most insane thunderstorm I've pretty much ever seen from around 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.,
mm,
subsequently followed by 75 to 78 and sunny for the next 10 hours, and then it started all over again. So as a Southern California native, this is feels like an entirely different world. I love it though. It's cool, but it's
I
very
hear you.
confusing.
It's interesting. That's one thing that I miss about Texas, oddly enough. First off, I hated rain when I came to Seattle, but then I kind of got used to it. So when I go back home, I was like, man, they have thunderstorms. You give me some action, some drama, some lightning and thunder. We don't get any of that here in
Love it.
Seattle. Just like the trickle mist. We may get lucky with a light show or some thunder every now and
Yeah.
then, but I miss it. I thought the sky was falling when I went back home. It was
And I
insane.
like I work from home, man. So like Southern, like I lived in Boston for a few years, and this was a nice middle ground. But the sunny and 75 weather, it's not always that awesome when you work from home because you're just looking out the window, like you can't be out there, but it's so beautiful outside. It's almost comforting to know that nobody's out there having fun during my work
Right.
week. Like there are
I hear
downsides,
you.
right?
I hear you.
Complaining about Southern California weather, but I don't mind a rainy day when I can't participate anyways.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, we're going to get started here. I appreciate you guys for coming in today and also joining for the webinar here. We're just going to meet the panel quickly. I'll just go a quick round of introductions. I'll introduce myself, and then I'll hand it off to Marta and also Sam. My name is David Liggins II. Yes, the second is real. Enterprise account executive here at Xnurta. I've been in this space just shy of a decade. I've built some private label brands. I did some consulting, went over to the agency side, been hands on keyboard, so this is right up my wheelhouse. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm going to hand it off to another fabulous member of our Xnurta team here, Marta Whitfield.
Yeah, hi, I'm Marta. I'm a customer success manager here at Xnurta. I've been with the company for just over a year. I joined Amazon Train during the pandemic. I guess, that was one of the few things in the world that was growing. And my job is to work with people like Sam, to work with David, make sure that our customers are onboarded, happy, and using all of our tools to their best abilities.
Absolutely. And next up, the man of the hour, Sam Lee. How's it going, boss?
What is up? Yeah, my name is Sam Lee. I did Amazon and Google PPC for maybe 3 years, and then I switched full tilt into Amazon DSP early 2020. So about 5.5 years of Amazon DSP experience. I started at Thrasio, helping them build out their Amazon DSP team there. And 5 years doesn't sound like a lot in a lot of industries, but in Amazon DSP speak,
DSP,
pretty
that's a lot.
much. So yeah,
Feels like
I've been
forever.
doing this quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And Trivium Group has been one of our great agency partners here, man. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you for the time we have so far. So I really appreciate you hopping on this webinar with us and doing it with us as well. Um, so just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. This is all about DSP, so this is going to be for agencies, brands, and other advertisers. We're going to be talking about what is full funnel advertising, um, gaining access to DSP. I noticed some questions around that, talking about how do you leverage it. There's conversations with leadership, metrics, and what's important, right? Because Amazon's a landscape that's a little bit different from other marketplaces as well. So there's some unique things there that we need to pay attention to. We'll dive into what AMC is and how it can be beneficial for you. Um, And then also we'll finish up with a live Q&A for the last 10 minutes or so of the hour. So we have a lot to cover today, so we're just going to hop right into it here. The first question on hand is, what is full funnel advertising? Now, I'm going to tee this up a little bit because we are very intentional with what we said here with full funnel advertising. When we talk about DSP, I think there's been some misconnotations or misconceptions of what DSP and what it can do for you. I'm just going to leave it that with that question here. So, Sam, I'm going to throw it over to you, man. What is DSP?
Cool. So again, we'll keep this first part simple because I think there's a lot to dive into with the full funnel advertising side of things. So Amazon's DSP, demand side platform, programmatic ads, audience-based display, and video. So it's the other side of the advertising coin, contrary to PPC. They work best together. There is sponsored display within PPC, which for those of you that are familiar with PPC and not DSP, that's the best way to get you a primer for what DSP is. It's sponsored display on steroids, DSP sponsored display on steroids. I like to call sponsored display DSP with training wheels. It's a much more robust, comprehensive version of sponsored display is the simplest way to put it. Not to be confused with Amazon's other DSP delivery service providers. That's very different. That's like
Yeah.
Uber for Amazon packages. I get a lot of questions about that. So if that's what you're
Google
looking
is
for,
Google is pretty bad about it. If you like Google some DSP things, you never know what you're gonna.
You
Google,
know what you're gonna get? Yeah, I hear
Amazon
you.
should have called them different things. Like there are a lot of acronyms they could have chose, and they just decided to make Amazon DSP twice, which I just think
Absolutely.
is absurd.
So
So
as
the
we talk
beauty of
about DSP with demand side platform, just
yeah,
one step back here,
yeah,
Sam, as you go through this. If anybody has any questions on the call, feel free to type them in the chat. We're going to have the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so we'll be able to answer those. So if you do have any questions, don't worry, we will get to them. If there's some critical ones, we'll get to them after we finish up with the information on the slide here and go for it that way. So feel free to type in chat if you have any questions as we dive into it.
very easy to distract. So feel free. Cool. So what I think is unique about Amazon DSP, and honestly, there are misconceptions about this idea in both directions from what I've seen, is that Amazon DSP covers the entirety of the funnel. So when we answer the question, what is full funnel advertising? That means you're marketing to people for awareness purposes, you're marketing to people for consideration purposes, and you're marketing to people for conversion purposes or loyalty purposes. And there are different methods to do that, both within Amazon PPC,
Mhm.
DSP, and obviously full funnel advertising is not specific to Amazon. So they're different marketing tactics and they have different goals, but they ultimately create a funnel, and they're meant to fuel one another. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about Amazon DSP, some people think that it's only for top of funnel. Other people think that it's only for bottom funnel. Basically, you can only run retargeting and that's all it means, or that you can only run high awareness plays and not actually drive sales. Both those things are wrong. Amazon DSP is what you make it. So in some instances, I've worked with brands who have a huge awareness focus. They want to run streaming TV ads or display ads off Amazon, and they want it untargeted or with large audiences. Awesome. Other brands I've worked with really need to get a high return ad spend. We want to focus closer to the
Mhm.
bottom of the funnel. Also awesome. I'd say the majority of brands that have been doing it for some time, we cover the majority of the funnel. I personally prefer to work bottom up, but Amazon DSP does have the ability to cover the entirety of the funnel, just depending on how you use it.
Absolutely.
Um,
And you said something here. You said working bottom up, and that approach. When we talk about how Amazon DSP and how it differs from sponsored ad. So with search and sponsored ads, there's a certain meaning when you're working bottom up. We're looking at maybe high converting, longer tail keywords, and start to work on the higher volume keywords and build up the funnel here. What does that look like for DSP?
Yeah, so on the DSP side, and working bottom up is usually when you're starting to test out DSP, you want to prove out the concept first. You want to prove it can drive sales, and then you go up the funnel and go into more introductory types of advertising. Bottom of the funnel to me is, for example, things like retargeting, things like cross-selling, things like product purchase remarketing. And what that means is, for example, people that have viewed your product but didn't purchase. people that have bought, if you're selling multiple products, let's say you're in the CPG space, people that have bought one of your products and you want to show them a different product, or product purchase remarketing. So your product is meant to ultimately be repurchased every 90 days and you have a lot of competitors. That basically means we want to take the people that have bought it, wait 90 days, and then show them an ad for our product again to facilitate a repurchase. So these are essentially people that in one way or another are already familiar with your brand, either because they bought from you before or they've seen you before.
Right.
So
Okay.
that to me is that compromises the bottom of the funnel.
Understand.
As we start to move up, there are way more options, right? So I'll give you just what I view to be the mid funnel and kind of what I do next is things like contextual targeting. So contextual is as opposed to audience-based targeting with a predetermined look back window, contextual is real time. So it's what a related product, what like a product that's commonly bought or purchased alongside yours, showing up on those pages in real time. It's a competitor's product potentially because they're actively browsing the category, but they're not on your page. You can show up on the competitor's pages. Category contextual targeting. So those are real-time targeting tactics that I view to be in the mid funnel alongside things like competitor views and purchases. So it's basically people that might not have seen or bought from you, but they're either actively browsing the category or they're looking at your competitors' pages. They're at least familiar and interested in the category, so they're in what we call the consideration phase. And then at the top is awareness, and that's the highest portion of the funnel. We'll dive more into the specific audience types later, but lifestyle audiences in markets somewhere between mid and upper funnel, in my opinion. Demographic targeting, it's more of an awareness play.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So, for people who are not as familiar with DSP and with contextual marketing, contextual is a little bit newer targeting that you can do with DSP. And it's really when you say, real time is if the customers in that market are searching for these type of products, like you mentioned, or they're searching for a particular term. For that example, you can actually surface that ad through DSP. So, given that they've expanded some of this functionality here, um, is it one or the other for sponsored ads or DSP when you're talking about lower funnel, or is it a combination of both?
It's absolutely a combination of both. I think that DSP for brands selling on Amazon, which you can run DSP even if you're not selling on Amazon, but that's another conversation. They're meant to work together. And we usually find the most success rolling out DSP when brands have already launched, scaled, and found some success on the PPC side. DSP is meant to be the next step of that equation. So once PPC scaled a bit, you layer in, and this is just a standard protocol. There are a lot of exceptions to this, but you layer in DSP, start near the bottom and mid of the funnel. That's supposed to lift up what PPC is doing on the conversion rate side, introduce new people, increase branded search for PPC, and then they're ultimately really meant to work together.
Got you. So, I know we may talk about this a little bit later as well, dive into it, but when is the right time to, I would say, expand to DSP? Because there have been scenarios where actually there's some people who start off with DSP first. I think those are fairly unique scenarios with larger brands, CPG and so forth. But most people start off with search, right? They've heavily invested in search. Let's just say that you have a brand who's pretty much 100% in search right now. They're thinking about DSP, but they're not sure if this is the right time. Like what would you give them I guess, how would you consult them and be like, hey, this is probably the right time for you to leverage DSP, or is DSP even a good fit for our brand? You're on mute right there.
There we go. Yeah, this is a conversation I've had every day for many years. I always try to avoid giving like hard number requirements because there are exceptions with all of this stuff, right? So I try to avoid the numbers, but just for the sake of averages, I'll probably give you some. So what I look at when I'm determining if a brand's going to be ready for DSP, it's a couple things. What are they spending on PPC? How long have they been doing it? And have they tried increasing their budget? And what are the results they've seen? Because usually what we see is a brand will start out with a relatively small budget on the PPC side. They'll start to scale it, and there's going to be a point in time where you start to see a decline in overall sales in terms of dollar in, dollar out. If you can continuously, and especially a lot of the brands that I work with, their main KPI is their bottom line. Like I've worked with brands like Unilever where their main KPI is spend, or other brands where it's top line sales. But I'd say a lot of brands, they want to make sure that the dollars that they're putting in are ultimately getting incremental dollars out on the bottom of the funnel, right? Like when
Right.
everything is said and done, they're making more money. That's what we're all here to do, right?
Mhm.
So what I like to look at is how much are you spending on PPC? And if you added another $5,000 to your PPC spend, what would happen? And usually, if you can put another $5,000 into PPC and you're going to increase that bottom number after all the fees and after everything, if you're going to get more money at the end of the day, there's no reason other than inventory issues not to continue to put money into PPC. When it's the right time for a brand to look at DSP, it's a couple things. One is you've started to see some sort of a decline in your incremental PPC spend. That's one reason. And DSP can help for a number of reasons. One, it can improve brand awareness, which can improve your conversion rates on the PPC side. Retargeting can clean up your overall conversion rates, because if you get them there with PPC, they don't convert. You get them back with DSP, they can buy. So a lot of brands will be spending a good amount of money on PPC. Maybe the conversion rate isn't fantastic. DSP can be a good way of cleaning that up. The other reason is, depending on what the category is that a brand's playing in, they either have a ton of competition for these search terms or a lack of awareness of the category. Like I've worked with brands that purely cannot scale their PPC spend the way they'd like to because they've invented something relatively new.
Mhm.
And in that instance, DSP is the perfect answer because you're not at the mercy of search terms. Because what you can do is you can identify your target audience based on other things they buy. Like if I'm inventing something relatively new or it's a smaller category, but I know that my customer base is also buying these things, also browsing these things, I can use DSP to get my products in front of them without needing a high volume of searches for this category.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, if it is a popular category, but the competition is so steep that cost per click is super high, there's no way to really drive efficient traffic to your pages anymore via PPC because you're playing in such a competitive pool. DSP is a fantastic answer for that because, for one, you can target your competitors, you can target people that have viewed or purchased, you can target anything within your category or complementary categories, and you're charged on a CPM basis as opposed to cost per click. So usually, like the most common thing I see is brands will scale PPC. They'll hit a point where they're like, if I put in 5,000 more, I'm not improving my bottom line.
Mhm.
That's a good time to test DSP. Another
Gotcha.
example is very competitive or relatively niche markets where we just need to get our products in front of people in a different way.
Mhm.
Also a fantastic time for DSP.
Gotcha. Before we move on here, I want to make sure I reiterate that because you gave me some golden nuggets there, man. We know Amazon is a space that, you search, right? You search, you have these phrases and terms, and you want to rank organically as high as possible for all the relevant terms that drive volume to your detail page to convert. But when you're creating something and you're disrupting that market, and there may not be necessarily a ton of search terms that correctly describe what you're selling, man. That's a really critical point here that you mentioned with DSP, since it's a little bit different in how you surface based on end market or lifestyle segments or that customer demographic versus just purely a search term model, which is heavily focused on sponsored ads. So I just want to kind of reiterate that that's really critical there to kind of understand the difference between those two here.
It's
Um,
demand
A
generation versus.
question based on that. I also have a question for Sam because this is something that a lot of brands come to me with. They're like, oh, we're thinking about launching DSP. Obviously, everyone is talking about DSP, but we don't have an extra budget. You mentioned like putting in 5,000 extra. Do you think it's a good idea to like take away that 5,000 and put it in DSP to test it out, or does it always have to be an extra budget?
It definitely doesn't always have to be an extra budget. There's no way for me to answer definitively. It's worth taking 5K out of PPC because it so depends. But I had this
Yeah.
conversation yesterday, actually, and sometimes it is. The way that I look at it is like your PPC budget, let's say it's 20K, 25K, whatever it is. What I look at is like, what are you getting out of that last 5K? Or if you're spending 100K or 110 and you're looking at pulling out 10, what is that 10K getting you? That's the thing that I look at. And can DSP potentially beat that? The answer is very well could.
Sure.
It's not
What
guaranteed,
you
but
take
very well.
away from?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
the other thing that's important to think about is just what targeting strategy you want to use within DSP. Like when a brand is spending 100,000 a month on PPC, or maybe significantly more than that, and they're wondering about pulling budget out, you're sending a lot of traffic to your pages. You might be targeting it with sponsored display. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Often I'll have brands take money out of sponsored display and let's do DSP instead. That's
Mm.
often a no-brainer in my opinion, but they can in tandem work well. But that's one way to do it. So what I would say is just create a potential DSP strategy with that budget if you need to pull it from PPC, and then weigh the pros and cons of what are we getting out of that last 5K in PPC and where would it be deployed here?
Absolutely, man. That's a great approach there. This actually kind of is a great segue, right? So let's just say that, we want to leverage DSP. How do we get access to this, right? How do we get access to DSP? How do we leverage it? How do we run it? So this is kind of the next one on the task here. So, Marta, if you can help me out with this, we want to run DSP. How do we get started?
Sure. Yeah, I think, there's a lot of misconception around how hard it is to start with DSP. But I think it is pretty easy if you have someone like us, or, a
Hard to
great
do.
tech partner, right?
Reach out to Amazon and get access. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have our contacts already. We are going to be able to set it up fairly quickly. It doesn't take months. It takes probably actually a couple of weeks, couple of days if we are on a really tight timeline.
Mhm.
Honestly, we just need to set up a new entity. We can connect you to our tech platform, and then it's just a matter of starting up your orders, getting some basic training, and running everything. So I
Mhm.
think it has become much easier than people think it is. And the cool thing about also partnering with someone like us is that we also already have the knowledge. Some mentioned like, oh, I've been in the space for 5 years. There are not that many people that have been in DSP for 5 years. We have agencies, we have brands who are only starting with DSP. I only started with DSP like a year ago. So, we're all here to learn, but also here to share. So if you don't have the expertise in house, don't think you have to hire someone. I think we are here to help you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's why we have excellent partners like Trivium Group who are experts in DSP. They've been running this for years. They understand what to do, and so these are the type of people who are trying to use our tool, the ones who are excelling in what they do here. What's unique about it, and this is just talking about some of the things that we've won our Technology Innovation Award on is our AI and our performance. One of the things here is that we still really encourage like manual intervention along with our AI. That's how we feel like we get the best results. And so when you have somebody like Sam who has that knowledge base, that strategy, he's been executing on this since the beginning when DSP was just we didn't even have AMC. It was technically the black hole that we didn't know existed, and we're trying to figure out how to unsolve this puzzle here. He's been running it that long, and so and now that we have tools to kind of help kind of accelerate quicker to activate these different media types on Amazon and off Amazon for that matter. That's why we bring on these these agency partners like Trivium as well. And
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
there's been some things about cost, how much you need to spend, and things of that nature. I know we touched on that a little bit, for people who would get started. And so, leveraging, DSP through some of our tech partners or agency partners allows you to be a little bit more flexible of where you kind of need to spend those dollars and what strategies that you want to kind of employ. So, Martin, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, about, people who are maybe just starting off and, who are working with some of our agency partners as well. What does that look like?
Yeah, honestly, I think if you asked me like a year ago, I would be like, oh, you need to commit to at least 15K a month. You don't have to anymore. I would say you probably need a couple thousand. You don't want to start with like $500, but the entrance fee is definitely much lower. But you do have to have enough budget to at least target a few audiences, and then you're good to go. You can just set your orders have been run, and there isn't really too much to it.
Yeah. And so there's obviously, this is the webinar with Xnurta and Trium, of course. And so with Xnurta, what are some of the things you can do with our tool that are some of our, I guess, our key differentiators when we're talking about execution of DSP?
Yeah, honestly, I love our AI part and our smart creation. I think that's one of the big things that was a blocker to DSP is kind of understanding what are orders, what are line items. You're moving from campaigns and ad groups, and suddenly you have this whole new vocabulary. How do you build it out? How do you make sure that you're tracking it correctly? That you're not creating some sort of mess that's hard to report. So the smart creation tool is definitely one of my favorites because it just makes it so much easier for first-time users to actually have a good, clean structure from the get-go, which I think both with PPC but also with DSP is so important to just start clean.
Yeah.
So yeah, our smart creation tool basically allows you to create multiple orders, multiple line items in a much shorter and much easier way than you would have to in the console. We also suggest things to you, right? That's the other thing that I like is that you can accept our suggestions. You don't have to. So if you already have experience and you know which audiences you're targeting, you can choose your own. But if you're new and you are not sure, based on your KPIs and your goals, we're also going to suggest certain audiences, certain targets. So it also makes it easier if you're like not sure how to start.
Yeah, I hear you. I was one of the power users of Xnurta during my heydays, I should say, but when I first got my hands on it. But man, working DSP, but this functionality wasn't out yet. So I was still
Yeah,
in
it's pretty new.
console running DSP. And let me tell you, a little bit of PTSD with some of those things, extending flights at the end or the beginning of the month, and then you have to do your line items to match the dates. There's this for anybody who's run DSP manually, we already know these nuances and some of these roadblocks that you can spend hours and hours and hours of your day with order creation, line item creation, copying templates, and so forth. And so working with the Xnurta with the smart creation process has definitely simplified it. And it also could be a learning tool for people who are kind of newer as well, since we try to leverage best practices with on and off Amazon targeting. If you're targeting mobile, on Amazon owned and operated, mobile web, desktop, display, all of those things, right? We help you kind of guide you through that process of creation. So I'm really proud of the tool. I'm excited about it. I wished I
Yeah.
had it earlier versus like now, but you know what? Better late than never here. So I appreciate that, Marta. So moving on here, and take some time here. We're going to talk about a little bit of the basics and effective ways for brands that are using DSP. And I'm going to piggyback this or throw this back over to Sam as well. I know you talked a little bit about it. There's so many things that you can do with it when you're talking about DSP, and we haven't even really touched on AMC quite yet, but we have cross-selling opportunities here. You talk about in-market and lifestyle. And for people who don't understand, these are Amazon's audience segments that you can leverage when you're targeting specific demographics for people who are shopping on Amazon as well. Um, Retargeting like abandoned cart is one good example, like low hanging fruit. You got subscribe and save as well. That's another thing that we target with our audience creation. But if you want to throw a couple golden nuggets in there, Sam, like tell us a little bit about some effective ways that some of the brands are using DSP that you worked with.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, look, you guys touched on this pretty well. The gift and the curse of Amazon DSP is all the options, right? It's not only options with things like inventory between Amazon, within Amazon's owned and operated properties, third-party exchanges, desktop, mobile, video, all this stuff, right? But the audience stuff is really what I would consider to be the limitless function within Amazon DSP. You just have to know how to do it. So just to make it as simple as possible, some of these I touched on, but cross-selling is a good example. This is if you sell multiple products, who's bought one but not another, increase the lifetime value for your customers. Pretty simple. In-market and lifestyle audiences, these are ones that I usually encourage people to be careful with. It is probably the simplest way to, like, you click into DSP, you look at the audiences, there's over 10,000 pre-created audiences. A lot of them are third party, a lot of them are upper funnel. Lifestyle and in-market audiences are very important and they have their place. they're usually the next step after custom audiences from what I usually run, but that's just my opinion. Essentially, in market is somebody that's been viewing a particular product category or a product type in the past 30 days. They'll fall into an in-market segment. So like in market for amino acids, who's looked at amino acids in the past 30 days? Lifestyle audiences, on the other hand, are continuous behavior. So if somebody is regularly shopping, buying supplements, they'll fall into a health enthusiast lifestyle audience. So in market is just what it sounds like. They're actively browsing. It's a little more specific. Lifestyle is continuous behavior. And when you start to go into the mid and upper funnel, you'll absolutely want to tap into these things. But if you're looking to dip your toe in the water a little bit, then usually custom audiences are what I go for. Retargeting, plain and simple, who's viewed my product, didn't purchase it. This is unique to DSP because you can't negate purchases within sponsored display. So that's incredibly important. The thing that I think is maybe underutilized is the audience negation factor. So you touched on subscribe and save audiences. Things like negating subscribe and save can be incredibly powerful. Abandoned cart audiences, which you have to utilize AMC to specifically make those. Retargeting covers them, but abandoned cart's more specific. You can either target those abandoned cart customers or sometimes even negate them if you want to have a really clean retargeting versus abandoned cart targeting segment. So similar product views, it's another custom audience within the DSP. Amazon creates a list of similar products. You can target people that have viewed those. I think that's a good thing to roll out early. And then contextual targeting, as David mentioned, is on the newer side. They had contextual related products came out a few years ago, but they continuously add to it. Now we have contextual key term targeting, which is incredibly interesting. We have contextual category, and we have contextual ASIN targeting. So these are like the 5 buckets I draw from when I'm doing an initial DSP build for the most part.
Got you. Hey, so I know there's a question here, and I thought about saving this one, but I think this is actually pretty critical for us to talk about now before we kind of move on here. So the question here, can we talk about the mechanisms of DSP? So is it all creative based, or also can you use main images and prices? And how is the pricing like sponsored products? So a lot of people don't understand, like, the click based versus impression based. Do you have custom creatives for everything that you do, or is there something like REC, like responsive creatives? If you could just talk a little bit about that, that would be awesome as well.
For sure. So 90% of the time when I launch Amazon DSP campaigns, I start with REC, responsive e-commerce creatives. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, very easy. You don't need any custom imagery. We just use the product detail page. So what these do is they pull the main image from your product detail page. And more importantly, they pull in your reviews, they pull in your price, they pull in your Prime badge, they pull in any discounting you're currently running, and they have an add to cart button right on the ad. One of the things that I think is the most unique about Amazon DSP and why it's more impactful and effective than a lot of display tools is that it's when you're using, especially when you're using responsive e-commerce ads, it's so heavily Amazon branded that people feel a lot more comfortable clicking it compared to a traditional display ad. Because when you think about if you're on your computer and you're on a website and you see a banner ad for a product and it's totally branded by that company, most people don't really click those because you don't know exactly where you're going. You don't want to go to some random website. I don't click a lot of banner ads, generally speaking. However, within Amazon DSP and responsive e-commerce, it's very clear that it's an Amazon ad. You know exactly where you're going. There's an add to cart button, and you're specifically targeting Amazon shoppers. And these are people that are always willing to go to Amazon because they use Amazon. So they're a lot more clickable than what I would say traditional display would typically be. And it also very much lowers the barrier to entry in terms of having creative assets to get this live. Can you run custom images? Yes. Can you use custom images within a responsive e-commerce ad? Yes. Those are all very solid options. Obviously, on the video side, you need assets to be able to run video. But if you're worried about launching DSP because you don't have a ton of creative capabilities, I wouldn't worry about that.
Got you. And I'll answer this last piece here, but one question I do have for you is, where do you show for DSP, right? I think that's maybe a little bit misunderstood or a little bit confusing. Some people know Fire TV Sticks, Twitch, and things of that nature, but where else would you show for Amazon DSP?
Yeah, so that's up to you. but you can show up in a lot of places. So what I typically do is I start on Amazon, right? Amazon, and I like Alexa a lot. I could talk about that for a while, but I start on Amazon. And there are a ton of places where ads can show on Amazon, on the homepage, within product detail pages, on the sides, a ton. And responsive e-commerce ads format into, I think it's like 14 sizes. Don't quote me on that. It's something like that. A lot of different sizes. And they can show up all over the page. So within that, we do things like setting viewability minimums, bidding higher to make sure we have big ads on the top of the page. But that's basically all over Amazon. Outside of that, it's a lot less about like particular websites and more about the audience that you're targeting and where are they going. So when you start to tap into things like third-party exchanges, let's say I'm on my computer and I go to Amazon, I look at your product, and then I leave and I go to ESPN.com to watch sports highlights. If you're running third party off Amazon DSP, you can show up on that page as well with display ads, with video ads. So it's really limitless depending on the way that you want to use it. And my usual recommendation is start on Amazon, gauge the effectiveness there, and then take your winning audiences and launch those audiences off Amazon. They can show up on mobile apps as well, the Alexa home screen, really all over the place, and it's only expanding.
Yeah. And
That's such
oh, sorry, Marta.
Sorry, but that's such a big misunderstanding, right? There was a discussion, I think, recently on LinkedIn, like DSP is on Amazon. Let's just make sure that it's out there, right? It's not just of Amazon.
Yeah, it's all how you use it. There's a lot of ways to simplify like perception of DSP. People think they figure it out because they know one thing it can do,
Mhm.
and that's not the case. And it's all about how you use it.
Absolutely. And for the person that asked that question, it's just one of those things where you can have it to where this is that ad that kind of follows around on the internet, right? As you engage and search, etc. If the advertiser is doing the right thing, then they're going to try to get you at the right time, right? So you're going to see this ad and with different places that you may go on the internet as well. Um, I'm going to step forward here just a little bit here, Sam, and we can talk about maybe some success stories that you have here. If going to the next slide here. So there's a couple here. I know that you had a couple things that you wanted to talk about, but yeah, let's speak about some successes that you have with
I'm gonna
DSP.
do yeah, I'm gonna do this very briefly because I know that we've talked quite a bit here, and I know that we want to have time for AMC and for
Yep.
questions.
Yep.
But I'll just put it this way. So when and how you use DSP is incredibly important. When I was listing these out, we use DSP in very different ways for different product categories. So when I'm talking about on the left, I mentioned Becky Cameron Home, which is one of the first brands I ever ran DSP for back at Thrasio, and then a headphone brand that I was working with for a long time. Retargeting, as simple as it seems, made such an incredible difference because their price point's near $100. They get a lot of people that are browsing multiple products and not making a decision right at that time. And retargeting is huge, as well as targeting views for your competitors. It's very simple, and it made a huge difference because when PPC revenues started to plateau, you layered in DSP, both sides rise. The other side is a little bit of a more inexpensive product. Like Neurogum's a good friend of ours and a brand I've worked with for a long time. Primal Queen's a great supplement brand that has seen insane success both on PPC and DSP side. And they're supplements, and they're obviously not as expensive as headphones or comforters. So the targeting strategy is a little bit different. We do a lot of contextual targeting. We do a lot of complementary product targeting. And the way that both sides work really well, but if you look at them in the platform, the way that we built it out, it's entirely night and day. So that's really all I wanted to touch on with that.
Got you. Um, that also leads us to the next piece of the story here, metrics, and why metrics matter. So one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that what is my return, right? What can I get? Why is this a value to me? ROAS is everything, and we know that in the Amazon landscape that could be something, but it's not necessarily everything. And so we may have to look at things in a little different light. So there's some hesitations coming from leadership and when they want to leverage this or spend the dollars. Is it going to be beneficial? Incrementality is the word, right? Incremental growth and so forth. But let's talk a little bit about that. What should we be tracking as far as DSP? What makes sense at a high level for leadership to kind of pay attention to?
Yep. So I see a question here as well, and this is perfect. I think these tie to each other really well. So there are a number of questions that a company might have as far as having doubt about if DSP is going to be the right fit for them. First of all, it might not be. It's very possible it might not be. They might be right. However, the things to look at and like, well, let's put it this way. The way that we look at performance and how we gauge the actual effectiveness of Amazon DSP happens in a couple different ways. As this question alludes to, the attribution's different. So on the PPC side, it's click based. On DSP, it's impression based. And that leads to a lot of questions as far as, did this impression drive this sale? And there's never going to be a perfect answer for that, of course, but there are things that we can do now to help to solve for that. A big one there is AMC. So I know Marta's going to touch on AMC, I think, on the next slide. So I'll leave the specifics of that to her. But AMC is a very solid tool to use to determine your customer journey, how DSP is playing into that equation, and what sort of sales it's driving. The other things to take into consideration. So what I do personally is I like to work really closely with the brands I work with and keep an eye on total sales over time, right? Because if you're testing DSP with a really small amount, you can't really use total sales as a metric to determine how effective it is, because you're not really spending enough to definitively move that needle enough when so many other things are probably changing. As you scale, that becomes a little bit more realistic. However, there are other ways to look at it. So there are metrics to look at outside of things like just return on ad spend to give you a clear feel for how your DSP ads are performing. Because I've seen instances where we're running bottom of funnel DSP for brands in the earlier stages. I've seen instances where it's completely spiked their sales. And I've also seen instances where even though the ROAS looked good, their total sales numbers were not increasing. And again, there can be a number of reasons for that. However, it's important to look at those things because when you're figuring out like, okay, was somebody already going to come back and buy if they weren't hit with a retargeting ad? There's no way to know that for sure.
Mhm.
It's impossible to tell. It's you can say based on overall metrics, you can see how it looks, but there's no way to predict consumer behavior in a hypothetical situation. So we don't know if they were going to come back. A lot of the times when I work with brands, we run retargeting, we see a big lift, we know they weren't going to come back. Other instances, we might be cannibalizing. And in those instances, what we look at is, for one, if you're having questions about incrementality based on the performance you're seeing in the platform, test out focusing more on mid-funnel and new to brand tactics and see what that does. In
Mhm.
some instances, I've seen a fall off because the bottom funnel was actually really working. In other instances, even though we saw a drop in return on ad spend, because we were getting our products in front of more people and a higher percentage were new to brand or had never seen the brand before, even if the return ad spend was a little bit lower, overall sales increased because we were introducing people to the brand. And if you have a high lifetime value, all the more reason. So what I would say is that there's never going to be a perfect answer for that.
Yeah.
But what's important is looking at sales volume over time, seeing based on those numbers if it's impactful. And then if you're feeling like it's not, you've been running it and you have some questions, test something else. Test mid funnel, maybe limit your bottom funnel spend and put more into mid funnel and see what that does. And the odds are there's something that you can do that's going to be impactful for your brand, provided DSP is a viable solution for you. It's just how you use it. And if you are working with somebody, let's say you're working with an agency and you're having these questions, you need to be asking them these questions or asking yourself these questions, because otherwise it's tough to know how your overall sales are being impacted. So we have a lot of methods that we use for testing this. It's never going to be perfect, but looking at different metrics, testing new things, and then when you're spending a sufficient amount, zooming out and seeing how your sales look.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. And there's some of these questions that we are going to get to in the Q&A, and I think that it will spark some more conversation there as well. But this is also a great segue for AMC because with AMC, Amazon's Marketing Cloud, I really, this is one of those ways where you had DSP has sponsored ads, but DSP is say, hey, just trust me. Amazon's like, just do it, spend the money. This is how you're going to grow the top line. You're going to get more people into the funnel, right? So you can do the things with them so they can bring you purchase from your brand, et cetera. But attribution was a little bit more difficult to understanding that path, et cetera. And so AMC, Amazon's Marketing Cloud, really helped unlock that information. It really helps you to visualize and able to see like where, like understand that customer journey. Did they hit sponsored ads? Did they hit our sponsored display or sponsored product or brand, and then they touched DSP? Did they come back? And did our remarketing work? Right? And there's different models that we have that can kind of leverage this. For example, Sam, you mentioned new to brand, right? Understanding. And so there was a business case that we had, or case study that we had where there was a 2 ROAS and a 4 ROAS, right? Obviously the brand was like 4 ROAS. We have a higher return on our ad spend. But we've realized through AMC and some of our models that we have that, hey, the 4 ROAS campaign actually had lower lifetime value than the 2 ROAS. So even though the ROAS was a little bit lower for the 2 ROAS, um, they were able to increase their overall sales and generating
Like
garner more
branded search
brand.
versus non-branded search too, right?
Say it again.
Good comparison to like branded search versus non-branded search,
Search.
where
Yes,
I can get you a
absolutely.
10 ROAS with branded search, but I could also get you a 3 with non-branded, and some often the 3 will drive you more sales. So
Right.
that
And no, that's a perfect example because we know the way that you're going to get more efficient with your advertising and grow your top line through sponsored ads is because you're ranked highly on non-branded terms. Yes, you obviously want to control your branded terms and your share of voice there, but if you're ranked highly and you're getting that organic traffic from people who have their wallets saved on Amazon, right, to make purchases from products like yours, you want to be visible. So similar to a DSP or AMC is it's understanding here that, hey, you have a longer lifetime value, but we weren't able to really get that easily. But now with AMC, we're able to do that. So I know I primed this up for you, Marta. What does AMC bring to the table? We talked a little bit about it, but tell us a little bit more about what AMC can do for brands and what it brings to the table, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I actually really love the question. Someone asked, like, how do we check all the attribution between clicks, views, impressions, between DSP and sponsored ads? And AMC is exactly the answer, as you said, because you can see all of these things and you can exactly see, like, oh, this person started their journey with DSP. Maybe it was just an impression, maybe it wasn't a click. So they would never count to the final attribution. As we know, Amazon obviously does last touch attribution, so only the last ad ever gets the credit, which, let's face it, most of the time it's going to be sponsored products. But that's like only such a small part of the story. And so you don't want to launch DSP and then be like, oh, it's not working, no one is clicking.
Mhm.
You want to see, are people going from DSP to a branded search? And you can see all of that with AMC. You can also use AMC for a lot of the planning that Sam was talking about. So, I think the first strategy you mentioned was cross-selling. Well, how do you know which products people buy together? You know that from AMC. You can check which products people buy together in one purchase, which products people kind of buy, like, they bought a coffee machine and then they bought like some accessories afterwards. You don't have to guess any of these things. You can exactly check all of this data. You can see how long does it take people to purchase, for example, from adding your product to their cart. So then another strategy that Sam mentioned is retargeting cart abandoners.
Mhm.
Well, for more expensive products, maybe you're buying like $1,000 TV. It might take longer. Maybe if you're buying socks, it's going to be one day. But again, you don't have to guess any of this. You can use AMC for all of this planning, and then you can use AMC to create all of these audiences as well. So I think there's so much to unpack there with AMC.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like if you're running DSP, and AMC has become also such a low entrance kind
Mhm.
of service that you should be using both.
I see. And one of the, I guess this is one of the ways that Xnurta has been making waves in this sea of tech and retail media is through our AMC no code solution, right? So we talk about AMC Hub and we talk about audience creation. We know that audience creation and potentially these custom audiences could outperform standard DSP audiences, right? And Sam, you alluded to this as well. When you have some of these exclusions, like, hey, have they seen or been hit by a sponsored ads, but also touched some of our DSP? But do we want to exclude people who are subscribe and save, right? Or maybe, there's we want to target subscribe and save customers a little bit differently just to make sure. they're aware and they're not going to leave to another brand. There's many different ways you can deploy this, but the AMC Hub and custom audiences are one of the key pieces of AMC to one, just understand how people are navigating through your product portfolio and engaging with your brand, but also being able to refine those audiences, those lifestyle, in market, and demographic segments tailored towards your specific need and what that campaign is trying to do as well.
I will say though that you can do that for sponsored display as well. I think this is a very unique thing
Mhm.
to Xnurta, so that's why I want to mention it. But you can actually create an audience that will like layer targeting someone, but also making sure that you're excluding someone.
Oh, really? I
Yeah,
didn't even.
which
I
I
didn't
think is
yeah, I didn't even know that.
quite
That's
unique.
great.
Yeah.
And so, and that's been huge, right? And so, going back to like the lifetime value, so having AMC data allows you to build these models, and Xnurta again, just making it easier for people to kind of help one not only visualize but pull these models without coding. We can get down to the campaign and ASIN level as well. So if you truly want to understand from a hero product, for example, and how people are navigating through the product portfolio by looking at that particular product, how they're engaging with other products in their product portfolio, with advertising types they've touched that led to a conversion, which actually generating the higher return. Or one of our newer models is new to brand. What campaigns and ASINs are bringing in the most new to brand customers? So when Sam talked about like improving that top line, right? We want to make more dollars. We make more dollars by getting new people into our brand, right? And I'm also keeping the people who are loyal to our brand there as well. And so as you talk about search, moving up, um, getting relevancy for as many non-branded search terms and being on the top of the first page, et cetera, for relevant search terms and that volume, that's going to be the play there from the DSP side as well, is making sure that you targeting the right people at the right time, and you can get the specificity through AMC and audience creation, but you can also understand where you may need to look based on the models that you've built out through AMC, whether it be path to conversion, I multi-touch attribution model, looking at the cross-product association, just to name a few, and also new to brand. That's going to be critically important as you start to make some strategic decisions going forward. Um, I want to wrap it up here with a question, Q&A. We do have a couple of
We
Q&A.
have a bunch of questions. I'm going to answer the easiest one. Is DSP available in other marketplaces or just US? It is available across the world. So
Yes.
There
that's
are
an
different
easy
segments within it,
question.
right? So like you used to have to have different seats to target North America versus EU versus Asia Pacific, which technically they will be slightly different segments within an existing seat, but you can target pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Got you. Just looking into the questions here. So I can maybe answer. How does Amazon DSP ensure timely delivery and maintain performance standards? So I'm not exactly sure about the performance standards, but when we talk about timely delivery, this is one of those things, and this is the expertise, right? So you can surface a particular ad a certain amount of times within a certain time period. And it's up to the advertiser to understand what that looks like, what's best, right? So some may be multiple times within the day, or it could be just a few times a week. So it just truly depends. If you have a shorter purchase decision or time cycle for a particular product, maybe you're looking at a higher end item like a TV or beds or something of that nature may have a longest purchase cycle. So it just depends. If you're talking about supplements, you need to replenish every 15 to 30 days or something like that, right? So it just really depends on that product, the category. And this is part of that data analysis in order to understand how,
Really quick,
how often you want to hit that customer.
one thing to touch on with that, these are order level settings that you're referring to, right? Whether it's through Xnurta or through the platform directly. So timely delivery and performance standards, you set your budget, you set your pacing at the order level. You also set KPIs at the order level. So whether you're using Xnurta's budget optimizer, Amazon's budget optimizer, whatever it is, you set a KPI and then it optimizes to favor that KPI, whatever line item's hitting that most. So if it's awareness, it's going to favor the cheapest CPM. If it's return, it's going to give more money to the line item that's getting you the higher return. So it'll optimize based on your KPIs.
And another question here, I think you touched on this just a little bit, right? So DSP attribution, click versus view, is different from sponsored ads, click only attribution. So how do we measure incremental orders from DSP? And is there a way to minimize cannibalization of organic and sponsored
Yeah,
ads? You touched on it a little bit.
we touched on this one because I read that question a little bit earlier, but best way to
Yeah.
look at it is you can zoom way in or zoom way out.
Mhm.
AMC, how you zoom in, how you look at how ads ultimately interact with each other. Zooming out, looking at total sales, looking at before and after you turned it off, provided you're not changing a ton of things. Those are generally my recommendations. And if you have questions and you're not seeing the incrementality, focus more on new to brand, focus more on mid funnel, and see if that moves the needle.
Um,
This one is CPMs on Amazon
yeah,
Nova.
you see that
It's
one?
how does that make sense? So it depends on your goals, because if you're going for an awareness play out of the gate, then yeah, third party is going to get you cheaper impressions, 100%. If you're going for more sales, people are on Amazon to buy things. So I am a lot less concerned, generally speaking, with CPMs as I am cost per detail, page view, and sales. So even if your CPMs are going to be more expensive, the impressions are usually more valuable on Amazon because you're on Amazon to buy stuff. And off Amazon can be incredibly impactful. We've seen a lot of success with it. That being said, return on ad spend is almost always higher on Amazon from my experience because you're on Amazon to shop. Even if you're looking at a different category, you're there to buy things. And as long as you're placing your ads in a relatively large and relatively close to the top, performance should be, from what I see, provided you're running things accurately, return ad spend is just higher on Amazon for that reason. And again, if your main KPI is reach, start off Amazon. If your main KPI is sales, start on Amazon.
This is interesting. I'm curious to hear what your answer is going to be for the next question here. Um, what is the minimum percent of ad spend that should be invested in DSP to actually test the impact of total sales?
25%.
You think 25%? So we're just starting off?
So, well, this is to test the total impact of sales, right?
Okay.
So, like, as a general rule of thumb, for the majority of brands I work with, our general split is DSP operates around 25% of PPC spend once it's up and optimized. The reason that that can differ as far as if we're looking at zooming out, engaging impact, what are you doing elsewhere that month? Because the problem brands always have, like we've run a number of tests where a brand will turn off DSP for the month, and often we'll see a decline in sales and we know it's working, we turn it back on. In other instances, we've turned it off and they're like, oh, weird, our sales went up. And I'm like, okay, well, what else did you do this month? Like, oh, we invested 50K in TikTok. It's like, okay, well, now our zoom out strategy doesn't really make a lot of sense because we're changing a lot of things. So if we're doing things more or less in a vacuum, which is easier said than done, I think if you put 25% of PPC spend as a separate DSP budget, that should give you a good feel for it.
Gotcha. Let me see here. It's interesting because most people that I see are running anywhere between the 10 and 15%. I think that's a little bit low. I think that DSP should be a greater part of the strategy at the 20 to 25, like you mentioned before. So just curious to see kind of what you were doing there as well.
Once it's up and optimized, 25 is a good rule of thumb, but every case is a little different.
For sure, I hear you. We did talk about the DSP, not just US. How long should we wait to determine if DSP was a success? I've heard the total sales won't materially move for at least 2 months after starting these DSP. This is
Okay.
really interesting because I feel like this goes back to maybe like, are we talking about awareness, but are we targeting loyalty, right? Where are we in the funnel? And I feel like that can determine where you want to drive the answer. But I'm curious to
Exactly.
hear your opinion.
Exactly. So it's like if we're running a streaming TV campaign and we're running lifestyle audiences, we're running all these sorts of things from an awareness standpoint, that's probably pretty accurate. Like 2 months could be, and it feels long, but that could be the case. If you're going more for an efficiency play closer to the bottom of the funnel, you should be able to tell a lot quicker. But how you tell is different depending on how much you're spending. So if I'm spending a relatively low amount just to dip a toe in the water and see if this is a viable platform for me, my KPIs are going to have to be in platform metrics, because if you're spending a small amount, it's tough to gauge it on total sales. But you should be able to tell the efficiency in a month or less. But if you're looking for a total sales increase for awareness plays, 2 months does make sense. If you're running more of a bottom funnel play, but you're also giving it sufficient funding, you should be able to tell relatively quickly. But again, every case is a little different. And I would just encourage that the higher up the funnel you're going with your targeting, the longer it's going to take.
Yeah. And I know we only have like a few seconds here. I just wanted to make sure that we wrap up. But on the last question there is yes, the analytics are in console and also through Xnurta, and you can get more attribution and data through AMC as well. Um, So I appreciate everybody joining today. I'm going to make sure that we end on time here. If you're interested in for a free audit here with Trivium Group, you can scan that QR code. And also, if you want a demo of Xnurta's DSP and our AI, you can scan the QR code for Xnurta here. I
And
appreciate
whoever
you
asked
guys.
this Performance Plus question, feel free to reach out to me because I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I don't have time.
Yes. Which question was that?
Oh man, I wish we could stay on longer.
I know. I came right at the end. Okay, yeah, absolutely. That would be perfect. So scan that Trivium QR code so you can get that question answered for you directly by Sam. I appreciate everybody who's attended. It's been a pleasure. Marta, Sam, thank you. We should do more of these together. I thoroughly enjoyed it today.
Otherwise, guys,
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Everybody, you
All
take care.
questions, guys.
Thank you.